all the guests today, especially Jay and family. Welcome to 443 Squadron. We're very honored to have you all here and to honor Jay today. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Matt Dukowski. I'm the commanding officer of 443 Squadron. And I'd like to thank you very much for coming out today for this very special occasion. With 2024 being the 100th anniversary of the Royal Canadian Air Force, our history and heritage are very much top of mind. So with us today for everyone here is Mr. Jay Hammond from Souk, BC, and on behalf of the commander of the RCAF, Lieutenant General Kenny, will recognize the contribution that he's made to our history and heritage. On the night of 12 May 1944, a Halifax bomber, side number Lima Whiskey 682, was shot down by a Messerschmitt Bravo Foxtrot 110 during a raid to Leuven, Belgium. Perhaps one of the dozens of Allied bombers shot down that week over occupied Europe. All 8 aircrew members were killed. The wreckage quickly sank into Belgian marsh and was forgotten about. The pilot that night was a member of 426 Squadron, RCAF. His name was Pilot Officer Wilbur Bentz from North Bend, BC. Sitting in the room with us today is his nephew, Jay Hammond. But Jay is more than just a Wilbur's nephew. He's someone who's contributed to the preservation of the legacy of his uncle's memory in a very special way, which I'm sure he'll tell us more about. But just a prelude to that, Jay came across old letters from his uncle and became interested enough in his story that he traveled to Belgium to one day stand upon the crash site. Once there, he realized that only 5 of the crew members' remains were ever recovered from the wreckage. His uncle Wilbur and 2 others remained buried within the wreckage just below his feet. That thought spurred him to action, and through engaging the 426 Squadron Association, he helped to encourage the excavation of the site. In 1997, the remains of 3 Canadians still in the aircraft, Pilot Officer Bentz, Sergeant J.W. Summerhays, and Sergeant F. Roach, were recovered and buried next to their 5 crewmates. The story doesn't end there. The recovered aircraft parts were transported to Canada, where some found their way into the restoration of the Halifax bomber November Alpha 337, which is on display in Trenton, Ontario. The rest were melted down into ingots, and I saw there's one on the table over there, which is pretty cool to see. In 2012, some 850 pounds of the aluminum was donated to the Bomber Command Memorial in London, England, where it became the roof of the pavilion over the statues, which is a very striking thing to see. In 2017, 8 of the ingots were donated to the RCAF, and since February 2021, the material has been incorporated into the wings, awarded to every RCAF member since that time who holds a flying qualification. This is a very real and very personal link that all RCAF aircrew currently flying have to our wartime heritage, and it means a lot to me personally. None of this legacy would have been possible without the tenacity of Mr. Hammond. Today, on behalf of the commander of the RCAF, I would like to personally thank you for your important contribution to not only the preservation of the memory of your uncle, but also to the historical legacy of the RCAF. And it's something that we can wear all the time. I would also like to present you a token of appreciation from your RCAF, a set of the pilot wings, made with the metal from Lima Whiskey 682, and it's inscribed on the back of the wings. Thank you, Mr. Hammond. The RCAF is eternally grateful for your efforts. The commander sent the letter. I'll read the letter as well from Lieutenant General Kenny. On April 1st, 2024, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Royal Canadian Air Force. Our mission in our centennial year has been to remember our proud history of service to Canada, recognize our currently serving aviators, and inspire the next generation of Canadians to consider service with the RCAF. This year also marks 80 years since the loss of 426 Squadron's Halifax Lima Whiskey 682, which is piloted by your uncle, Pilot Officer Wilbur Boyd, with Bentz in May 1944. It was because of your research and 13 long years of negotiations with several Canadian and Belgian agencies that Lima Whiskey 682 was recovered, and the remaining 3 Canadian crew members given proper burial in Gerardensburg Cemetery in Belgium. In recognition of your efforts to locate and recover Halifax Lima Whiskey 682 and its crew, it is my pleasure to offer you this set of RCAF Pilot Wings. Since 26 February 2021, RCAF aircrew have been presented with flying badges containing aluminum recovered from Halifax Lima Whiskey 682. The inscription of the Halifax tail number on the rears of each set of wings serves as a connection to the tangible piece of RCAF history. Thank you again for your efforts in preserving the memory of the Lima Whiskey 682 and her crew. Sic iter ad astra. Sincerely, E.J. Kenny.
So, Jay, on behalf of the commander, your family has provided our family, the Air Force, with some medal that we wear proudly. So it's very appropriate, I believe, that the Air Force offers your family a piece of metal. Only 100 of these coins were made by order of the commander of the Royal Canadian Air Force, and they were to be presented in this, our 100th year, to only 100 families. So they're special in our world, as in your world, metal is special.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Oh, Steve, thank you. What an honor.
One final token from 443 Squadron. It's not a commander's coin, but it's the coin on behalf of all of us. Our gratitude for you and what you've done for us as commanding officers.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Squadron logo. Beautiful. Thank you very much, guys and women. It's an real honor. Real honor. Thank you on my uncle's behalf for all that you've done for us. Excellent.
We appreciate you and your family and everything you did for this country.
You must be obviously very proud not only of your family's history, your contributions of your uncle, but I mean this has turned into your life's work as well. It must be a point of pride for you.
It is a point of pride. My mother was exceptionally hurt. She missed her brother. She only had the one sibling. It was a very painful loss for my mother and my grandparents. And my grandmother never got over it. And my mother, she used to keep a picture of Wib on her nightstand. So there was his picture every day to look at while she brushed her hair and did her makeup and all of that. So she was always thinking of him every day.
What day was it that his plane was shot down?
3 to 4 o'clock on May 13, 1944.
Okay, and where?
Came down near a little town called Garrardsburg. Garrardsbergen. Garrardsburg.
Belgium, right?
Belgium.
Belgium.
What was his age at that point? How old was he?
Wib, at that time of death, he would have been 23.
Just starting his life.
Yeah.
How long had he served in the war at that point in
He
time?
joined up, and if I'm not mistaken, he joined up in 1941.
2 years
He
ish.
went to the recruiting center in 1941, and then went through all the training in Canada, was shipped overseas on a French luxury liner. Well, it was French, but before the breakout of the war, within days, the British took it over and transported all of the French gold bullion aboard the Louis Pasteur to England to prevent the Nazis from getting it.
Yeah. How did it feel when you're digging in this bog,
Yeah.
and you hear that excavator scrape on something metal? I mean, what would that moment?
That moment was like, we're here. It was like, aha moment. You know, because everything up to then had been, you know, what people say or what people think, you know, or maybe they found a little piece of metal. That excavator scraped a large chunk of metal. We knew it was like,
Wow. Wow. And where's his remains now?
his remains are buried in Gerardsbergen, Belgium.
I didn't know Wib, obviously. Neither Jay nor I knew Wib. But it was like we did, because there was this picture of him in in front of his trainer on my mom's dresser for ever since we'd been kids. And I knew the impact that it made on her, losing her brother. And then I witnessed the impact on her mom and dad, Wib's mom and dad also. And it was pretty devastating. And right up to not long before Nana died, she still couldn't talk about it when I asked her a direct question about Wib. She just kind of fumbled with papers on the table and never did. It was, you know, and so right until the end. And both Jay and I have lost children, and I could just feel some of her pain. A missing man formation, 4 prop planes, not jets, prop planes, and as they flew over the grave site, the third one on starboard side pulled away and trailed red smoke. It was just beautiful. My son read High Flight, and then you heard the rumble of the propellers from the planes approaching in the distance, and then he pulled off and trailed red smoke. What an honor. What an honor from the Air Force.
I don't know who wants to answer this, but can we get a little, just talk to me about Martin and who he was and how you came to befriend the man and
Well, obviously Martin grew up in Germany.
yeah.
He grew up in a little town, which has since been amalgamated to a much bigger town, the name of which escapes me at the moment. He actually went into the army first, before the Luftwaffe, and he did his basic training with tanks and all that sort of stuff, but he decided he would much rather go into the Luftwaffe. So he got a transfer, and he went to different training schools. They were called School A and School B, and depending on how many engines it had, that's where he went. So he started out with a single engine, then a double, twin engine. And then eventually he got his wings. And one of the first things he did, he was sent down to Iraq, because at that time Iraq was working with Germany, and they were fighting the British, right? Had to do with oil fields, similar to today.
Surprise, surprise.
And Martin flew in what was called the Sharkfish Squadron. And if you look, I think there's a picture over there. You look, it looks like big shark teeth with red. It's a cool looking squadron logo. And it was on an ME-110. So after being there for a while, they were recalled to Germany. And then he was sent down to Paderborn for training as a night fighter. And this could get long, so tell me when to be quiet. So when he finished his night fighting school, he was eventually transferred to a night fighting squadron. And it was pretty slim pickings for the first year or so. a night fighter. Night fighters were very skilled, and to be a successful night fighter, you had to be an especially good pilot, because you're flying at night. You've got a radio operator behind you, but it was a hard job. It was a hard job, and he said he got shot down 3 different times, and he and his radio operator and his rear gunner, they all survived without more than cuts and bruises. And there's a picture of Martin over there with an arm in a sling coming out of a hospital. And he continued on. And in the end, he had 48 confirmed victories. They didn't call them kills, they called them victories. And for each victory, they had to fill out, and I have a copy of one there, had to fill out a victory claim. And then that was sent back to headquarters, and they went through a vetting process and eventually approved it or denied it. So his numbers, when he said he had 48, that would be like the bare minimum. All but 6 of them were RAF or RCAF or RAAF bombers. Never got a Mosquito. The Mosquito was too fast to get. There was only 1 Mosquito shot down during the war by a night fighter. So Martin had all of these victories, and the others were American bombers, B-17 or B-24s, and they were shot down during the day. At war's end, they were sent towards Holstein-Schleswig, at the northern part of Germany, where it abuts Denmark. And they basically sat there, and the Allies arrived, and they were sent to a prisoner of war camp. He stayed there for a couple of years. You know, it wasn't a hard life. He was a driver for some mucky-muck in the British Army, and eventually was released within 2.5 years. And what he did then was he went down to visit his close friend, Heinz Wolfgang Schnaufer. He was called the Night Ghost of Santron. He was the most successful night fighter in the Luftwaffe. And there's pictures of him over there. And he stayed with Wolfgang for 3 or 4 days, and then he made his way to Lisbon, even though he wasn't supposed to. He was supposed to stay in touch with the British Army in Germany. He went down to Lisbon, and he caught a ship to went to Brazil. And there he started his whole life over.
Well, and you met him at your uncle's funeral, right?
I met him at my uncle's funeral, and he had me to his place in 2008. So I flew down to Brazil in 2008.
So you became friends?
Pardon?
You became friends with him?
Oh yeah. Oh, we talked on the phone at least 5 or 6 times a year. I got dozens of letters from him.
No ill will?
Absolutely not.
Just a part of war, right?
There are still some people that wouldn't shake his hand. For instance, at my uncle's funeral dinner, just went like that to him. Some people who couldn't get past it, but they were few and far between. Few and far between.
You must have had a bit of a shock to see that at the funeral. I mean, what was your reaction to this German ace being at your uncle's funeral? Did you Were you as open?
Oh, absolutely. I had been talking to Martin for years.
But to actually see him there, Maureen, can I ask you how you felt about that, just at that moment?
He was a very small-statured man, standing well away from the people that were gathered around the graves, and his long raincoat.
Long raincoat. That's the
Long
word I was
raincoat
looking for.
and missing man formation had gone past, trailing the smoke. And I remember thinking it was surreal because I should be filled with anger at this man for having killed my uncle and seeing the destruction that death caused within the family.
All the
But
families?
all the families. But I couldn't find that anger because I realized he was doing his job, and it could just as easily have been Wib that made the Messerschmitt got his plane. So
All the families. The government
Yeah.
flew over brothers or sisters of my uncle's crew, or nephews and nieces of my uncle's crew. And every one of them, to a man or woman, was friendly, introduced themselves, and there was no anger or angst, nothing. Everyone behaved really well, except for one guy.
It'd be pretty gracious if this man would come from overseas.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely it was. He didn't know what he was walking into. He didn't know.
I don't know if you mentioned it before, but
Pardon me?
did he talk about it with you? How
No, he
felt?
couldn't remember.
He couldn't. No.
He
But how
shot so
he-
many planes down, he couldn't remember this particular incident.
But the actual ceremony, did he ever reveal to you how it felt for him?
Well, actually, he would fire into the wings in the hope, and he called them boys, could get out before the plane went down. So he had told me that before, and he confirmed that at the funeral. You know, he knew that there were young men in the bomber, just like him. You know, 3 young men and his crew, and
And it was interesting because Jay mentioned earlier about the book with the painting on the cover and how it was the outer port engine that was on fire, and that's what Martin always went to get, was that outer port engine. And as we were recovering the plane, that was the one engine that we couldn't get, but we saw smoke damage, fire damage.
Fire damage to the
for
aluminum.
the inner port. Yes, it was pretty astounding that, what are the chances, 1 in 4, that they would have the correct engine on fire. Yeah.
Can I ask you one last question?
Oh, no.
What does this mean for you to get this today, and yourself, Maureen? Like, what does this mean?
Well, for me, to look at that and realize it's made with aluminum from my uncle's bomber means that every member of the Royal Canadian Air Force who is awarded these wings remembers my uncle. He's part of their lives. Even though they don't know him, he's part of their lives. And when they put their wings on, he's with them. So it makes me feel good. It makes me feel good to know that my uncle's not forgotten. There were a lot of men that died in Bomber Command. Just, you see it, and it's all these names. That doesn't mean at the Bomber Command. What do you call that site up near Lincoln? At Lincoln, they have these steel plates that are sort of in concentric circles, and it goes all the way around, and then there's a spire in the middle of it. And every member of Bomber Command, regardless whether you were RAF, RCAF, RAAF, RNZF, everyone's name has been engraved into that sheet of metal. It's all rusted now, it's reddish brown, but it's pretty spectacular. Pretty spectacular.